Hi everybody, it's Saul Sunforge for Dungeons and Taverns. How's everybody doing? Today's video is on the ins and outs of movement. Um, Movement is a key element in the game. You move everywhere you go, unless you're using your spells to get everywhere. Today I wanted to cover everything I could possibly tell you about movement and not have this video be several hours long. It doesn't need to be. So let's get into it. Um, in D&D, if you're playing on a battle mat, it's usually squares for the grid, or it could be hexes. Um, if you're playing D&D in most tabletop games, it goes in increments of 5 feet. Um, so I have seen DMs who've used 10-foot squares, but since speeds are often, you know, something ending in a 5, uh, it doesn't work as well. Uh, so I feel like 5s work best in all of D&D. You'll come across that actually. If you're a DM and you want more realism to your movement, on page 242 of the Dungeon Master's Guide, there's actually an alternate rule that you can use that your diagonal movements alter between 5 and 10 feet. This is because you're cutting the plane in half, and so your first diagonal is 5 feet. Your second one would be 10 feet of your movement. Um, no matter when in that save movement action you went diagonal. If you did it a second time, that second one's going to cost you 10 feet. If your movement speed ever becomes a fraction due to an increase or decrease in your speed, I rule that your first move, you can't move that additional square because it's a fraction, and so you wouldn't make it to that square. But I mean, technically you would, but in tabletop terms, things are a little bit different. Math is a little bit more wonky. Trying to do 3D things on a 2D plane, you understand. But in order to compensate for the fraction, if you could normally move 5 squares in its difficult terrain or any other circumstance, the fraction I rule, since it would be 2.5 squares, I rule that the first movement you get 2 squares, but if you make it a second movement and the circumstances are the same, it's still difficult terrain. That second movement you get 3 squares instead of 2, because you're taking the fraction from the first portion of your movement, and then you're taking the fraction from your next movement, and I give an additional square. So it doesn't feel like it punishes you as much. But it's up to the DM, of course, on how they adjudicate it. But that's what I do. I feel like it works the best. Feel free to come up with your own solutions if you like. The most common affliction is the prone condition, which basically means that your character has been knocked down to the ground, whether it's through a magical spell or the shove action, or you've been grappled and then restrained. There's a plethora of ways that you could go prone in D&D, and it's the most common condition. You also can make yourself voluntarily go prone. You're basically just going to the ground. It's almost always for a more tactical positioning. Melee attackers against you have advantage, and ranged attackers against a prone target actually have disadvantage, because you're using the ground as cover. So it's harder to hit you. So when you're prone, if your character can move, say, 60 feet, it would cost you 30 to get up. No matter how many feet of movement your character starts out with, getting up from prone is always going to take half of your movement speed to stand up. So if your speed is 30, it would take 15. Again, if it's the fraction in D&D, fractions lower. They round down no matter what the fraction is, except when you do rules as written, or your own flair or whatever you like to call it to the rule. DMs always have leeway. It's one of the first biggest rules in the book is that their rules are just guidelines, and the DMs can change them as they wish to. Of course, as long as they're consistent. Let's see. So if you are, for instance, knocked prone, and you're doing your death saves, if you succeed on your death saves, you're not dying. You're still unconscious, and so you can't get up when you're unconscious. So you have to have at least one hit point to be able to stand back up and get in a battle. So somebody would have to come over and heal you in order to get back into that battle. Let's see what else. Crawling, climbing, and swimming take one additional foot to move per foot that is moved. So if you are normally would be moving 1 foot, it would take you 2 feet of movement to crawl, climb, or swim, unless you have a crawl, climb, or swim speed. In that case, if you have one of those, you would negate or bypass the difficult terrain of that type. If your path of travel is impeded in any way, I probably should have put this point first. If your path of travel is impeded in any way, it's called difficult terrain, where every 5 feet of your movement actually costs you 10. Things like crossing water, tall grass, sand, moving uphill, rubble, if dead bodies, corpses, your fallen enemies, certainly can be difficult terrain. And passing through a party member's space if you aren't size categories smaller than them. Crawling takes one additional foot to move, but if you're crawling through difficult terrain, it would actually triple the movement, so it would be 3 feet for every 1 foot that you moved. So if you were moving 1 square or 5 feet, that would cost you 15 feet of movement or 3 squares. So it's a risk reward to consider in primarily in fights. But we will get to travel as relation to movement. All right, moving along. Jumping. Rules as written. A long jump. When you make a long jump, you cover a number of feet up to your strength score. And if you move at least 10 feet on foot immediately before the jump, when you take a standing long jump, you can only move half of that distance. Either way, each foot you clear on the jump costs you a foot of movement. And you can jump over difficult terrain. But that's going to, your DM may have you roll the dice to see what you get. You'd have to do a check, athletics, almost assuredly, but it could be, it could be acrobatics. Okay, where was I? Oh yeah. This rule assumes that the height of your jump doesn't matter, such as jumping across a stream or a chasm. But at your DM's option, you could have a DC 10 athletics, or really whatever they want. But since we're going over rules as written, it's a DC 10 athletics strength-based check to clear a low obstacle, no taller than a quarter of the jump's distance, such as a hedge or a low wall. Otherwise, you hit it. In that circumstance, I would then make the DC higher. The DC 10 is fine, but then I would make it according to the jumping circumstances. Make the jump a little harder, or if it's easier, then I might. There just wouldn't be a roll once the characters get to a certain point, where DC 10 is almost guaranteed, or it is guaranteed based off of their bonuses and their proficiencies. There's no reason to roll if you can't fail, because there are no critical hits and critical misses in skill checks. Let's see, what else? Oh, if you jump and you land in difficult terrain, you have to succeed on a DC 10 Dex acrobatics skill, check to land on your feet. Otherwise, you land prone, so that means you fall on your face, essentially. When you're making a high jump, you can leap in the air a number of feet equal to 3 plus your strength modifier. If you move at least 10 feet on foot immediately before the jump, when you're making a standing high jump, you can jump only half that distance. Either way, each foot of you clear on the jump costs a foot of movement, just like the long jump, the high jump. It's all the same. You're just changing directions and momentum from jumping far to jumping high, but it's still going to cost you the same. So there's that. You can extend your arms half your height above yourself during the jump. Thus, you can reach above you a distance equal to the height of your jump, plus 1.5 times your character's height. That doesn't really come into play. Too often, really. But I wanted to give you, this is the ins and outs, so I'm giving you everything I possibly can. What else? Oh, travel pace. Fast travel is 400 feet per minute. Normal is 300 feet per minute. Slow is 200 feet per minute. In an hour, you can travel. I think. Hold on. I think. Let me see. Let me look. Don't let me give you wrong information. Let me edit. I'll just edit it. All right. So I just went to look it up. Yeah, I was right what I was going to say. So fast travel is 400 feet per minute. It's 4 miles per hour, or 30 miles in a day if you're traveling fast. But if you're traveling fast, you get a -5 penalty to your passive perception, which is based off of your wisdom, to spot random encounters before they happen. So this way your party isn't surprised. Your normal rate of movement would be 300 feet per minute, 3 miles per hour, or 24 miles per day. Since D&D goes off of sets of 5, like I mentioned earlier in the video, and in previous videos too, probably, I turn that 24 into 25, just for my ease. And it's not gonna, it's a minor benefit to the party, but I don't want to add an extra day's worth of travel time if I don't have to, or extra hours or whatever. It's just easier to compute. And then slow is 200 feet per minute, 2 miles per hour, or 18 miles for traveling day. But you're able, the benefit, since there's a detriment to going fast, there's a benefit to going slow. And the benefit to going slow is that you're able to use stealth, but you'll see that the travel time increases substantially. So with that one, I actually make the slow go 15 miles in a day. So this way, the detriment part, where the other one was the benefit part. So, it all rather evens out pretty much, but it makes the numbers, more computable. The travel pace, it assumes that you're traveling on simple terrain, like open plains, actual roads, a dungeon. If you happen to be traveling through a mega dungeon and it takes hours or days of travel to get somewhere else in that dungeon, which is insane, by the way, to make a dungeon that huge. But if that was ever the case, then those paces are good to go that I gave earlier. But if there's like steep mountains, or there's ice, or swamps, or like dense forests, roots, brambles, bushes, things like that in your way, it's all difficult terrain, and it reduces your travel pace by half. So even if you're going slow, you would go slower. But there's going to be things coming up here in the next portion that I'll talk about that will help you to improve your movement, besides picking a larger character. Larger characters tend to move faster, and so they get more movement. If you're a small character, your speed is usually like 10 less than a medium-sized creature. So here's some things that will improve your movement. And these are going to be, magic items, class things, spells, that kind of stuff. So, first off, the mobile feat will give you an incredible amount of things. I highly recommend it, especially if you're worried about your movement speed being affected. But the mobile feat will negate difficult terrain, which means negate means it cancels it out. When you use the dash action, it also increases your movement speed by 10 feet. In addition, when you make a melee attack against a creature, you don't provoke opportunity attacks from that creature for the rest of the turn. So that means if you have the mobile feat, you're able to attack the creature. Whether you hit or miss, that creature isn't able to attack you back. And so you're able to move away from that creature safely without repercussions from that specific creature on that specific turn. It's a really strong feat to pick up. Because it's whether you hit or miss that creature, it triggers. Rangers have an ability called Landstrider, which will bypass all non-magical difficult terrain. And most difficult terrain is going to be non-magical in the campaign. Or at least it should be. If you're coming across magical terrain all the time, that's... Yeah, I'm not going to go on a tangent. I'm working on it. The next item is the Ring of Free Action. When you wear this ring, difficult terrain doesn't cost you extra movement. In addition, magic can neither reduce your speed nor cause you to be paralyzed or restrained. So, players go for those rings of free action. If you you happen to visit a magical shop, you can mention that you're looking for that item, or however your DM does it. Maybe you have to roll something to even see if your character even knows what that item even is to call it that, or you can role play it out where you don't know the name of the item, but you kind of want something that does a certain effect, and then your DM will then tell you the item, and then your character will know that way. Flying, of course. There's races. There's winged kobolds, and there's ways to get flying through spells and magic items. But flying, you completely bypass difficult terrain because you're not on the ground. You're flying, unless there's something that's going on in the air that's causing difficult terrain, which could happen if the wind is gusting. Or you're flying in a storm, if there's gale force winds, then obviously your flying creature is not going to be as effective. The freedom of movement, it's a spell that's available to bards, clerics, druids, and rangers. Misty Step allows the caster to teleport to unoccupied spaces 30 feet away, but the caster has to be able to see that space. But you could potentially just bypass the entirety of difficult terrain, or find a square that isn't difficult terrain within that 30 feet, and then just maybe Misty Step again, and you're home free, or you're looking for another space that doesn't have difficult terrain. But you can do that as many times as you have spell slots for it. And then there's Dimension Door, which is kind of an upgraded Misty Step, in that it increases your range from up to 30 feet all the way up to 500 feet. And you don't even have to see the space you want to go to. And you can bring another party member with you. But of course, it's a different spell slot, and so it really depends on what spell slots you're willing to expend, or when your long rest may be. You consider all those things while you're playing, players. We're okay. Windwalk. Windwalk is really good. Not good. It's great for world travel because it grants up to 10 creatures, which was gonna be the size of your party. If you have a party over 10 creatures, then I'm sorry for you as a player, and I'm very sorry for you as a DM. Holy crap. I've done it. Don't recommend it. But yeah, up to 10 creatures, they take like a form of like a cloud, and they can travel 300 feet. So your movement speed of, if you're small, 25, or larger, 35, and, all that stuff, that doesn't matter. Because once you turn into the cloud, your movement speed increases to 300 feet. It isn't practical to use this in combat, however, because you're still a cloud. But it's very good for world travel, in my opinion, because you can use it up to 8 hours, and the world travel, you don't really, unless you're trying to force march. In that case, you're rolling for exhaustion levels and things like that. But I mean, you could cast the spell again. There's nothing to stop you from doing that. But you can bypass walking altogether because you're flying. You're a cloud. And then the last thing, you could use a teleport or a gate spell. Those are like 7th or 9th level spells, and you may not want to expend those for a temporary movement condition. If the movement condition will persist for a very long time, then it makes more sense to use it. But generally, it's ill-advised to use your higher level spells unless you're getting yourself out of a critical jam, or maybe you're saving the party from a TPK by getting out of there and teleporting all of them with Windwalk. And so you guys could, maybe in combat, you all just turn into clouds, and poof, you're gone. You float away. All right, so the video, I actually went a lot faster than I thought it would, because I tend to go off course a little bit sometimes. It's always relayed around the point, but it takes me longer to get to the point when I do that. So I've been working on not doing that. So yeah, we're like at 22 minutes or 23 minutes. And I'll have this video uploaded to you tomorrow. So the 4th. May the 4th be with you. All right, I'll catch you guys later. Solace Unforged, signing out. Hopefully you enjoy my content. Don't forget to give me one of these. And if you could be so kind to give me a follow and tell your friends about my channel, that's always helpful. I'll talk to you later. Thanks for watching.